All right, y'all, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy, Nick Jones. I hope you're having an amazing day. Check it out. This video, I gotta say something, right? You know I gotta say something about this video. You've probably seen this video. A lot of people have already been making videos about it on YouTube and Twitter, so maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. Let me just give you a quick breakdown before we dive into it. So Jordan Peterson, the dude in the middle, right? The dude with like the two-tone maroon and navy blue suit. I don't know who told him to wear that suit. I don't know who told him to wear that, but hey, he wore it. So it is what it is. But check this out. He's been making a lot of videos, a lot of interesting videos about the Bible. And specifically, he has a panel that he's brought together to talk about the book of Exodus. And here's where things got really, really interesting. They get to the part where they're talking about lust and adultery, and they're asking the question, is lust adultery? Now, the reason why this video has got so much attention is because Dennis Prager. So Dennis Prager, he's the guy on the left, or maybe it's your right. He's the older dude with the full head of gray hair. He has both his hands like crossed on the table at the end. He's a very popular, well-known figure throughout the media. He's Jewish. So, obviously Christianity and Judaism is two separate religions. So he has, a very different belief system than us Christians. But nonetheless, his view on lust and adultery is very, very interesting. So I want to play this video, and then as always, I'm going to, let you know what I think throughout the process and show you some scriptures. If you have not already, please like this video. It does do a lot to kind of help out the channel and all that good stuff. All right, so let's get into the video.
I am less interested in the interior person, morally speaking, than you are. And probably any of you are. And it's largely, I do believe, because I come from a behaviorist, law-based religion. We care how you act. That's why we don't have a claim that if you look at another woman with lust, it's as if you've committed adultery with her. I am, as I said yesterday, I thank God for America's Christians. And Maimonides said if it weren't for Christians, the world wouldn't know about the Torah. So I'm a big Christian fan. But obviously Christianity and Judaism are not identical religions. And we have no equivalent that if you look upon another woman with lust, it's as if you have committed adultery with your heart. There's only one way to commit adultery in Judaism, and it's with a different organ. And I'm not being cute. I'm being very realistic. Looking with lust is not a sin in Judaism.
What's the stance on pornography?
So pornography. When I'm asked this question,
just to put you on the spot.
You did indeed. Okay, so my answer, when it's raised on my radio show, I have a male-female hour, and I'm very open about sexual subjects. I always ask if a wife calls me and says, my husband looks at pornography, I found on his computer, I have one question. How is your life of intimacy with your husband? Is it good? In other words, is the pornography in lieu of you or in addition to you? Mm-hmm. And I know this is not a religious answer, and I'm not even giving a religious answer. I'm giving what I think is a moral and realistic answer. Men want variety. And if adultery is a substitute for, if pornography is a substitute for one's wife, it's awful. If it's a substitute for adultery, it's not awful.
Okay, hold on. If it's a substitute for one's wife, it's awful, right? But if it's a substitute for adultery, it's not awful. In other words, he's saying married men can look at these type of videos on the internet, pleasure themselves to these videos, right? And that's okay. If that is being used as a tool to prevent that man from actually going out and hooking up with another woman who is not his wife. But if it's replacing your wife, if you're, just, I'm trying to keep it PG. If you're just on the internet, just watching these things, just pleasuring yourself and not wanting anything to do with your wife, then that's bad. And, he says something very, very interesting at the very start of this video where he was talking about, how he's Jewish and they have different beliefs. They don't believe that if you look at a woman with lustful intent, they don't believe that that is you committing adultery. They're more concerned about the action. It doesn't become adultery until There's an action tied to that intent, whatever is going on in your heart, according to Dennis Prager. But here's my thing. Here's my thing. If a man is going on the internet, right? A married man is going on the internet, is looking up a specific video, a specific scene of another woman who is not his wife, right? Watching this video, pleasuring himself to this video, finishing. Y'all, we gotta have a real adult conversation here. Most men, they're not sitting there watching, these explicit videos and just sitting there, just watching, like, and eating popcorn, eating chips, eating snacks. They got something else in their hand when they're doing it. Let's just keep it real. And as they're doing it, they're finishing in the same way that they would finish with their wife or with another woman. Is that not an action? Is that not an action? I don't agree with men using explicit videos on the internet as a tool to prevent them from actually cheating. I think that is adultery. I think that is adultery. I think most women would agree that is adultery. I don't think there's majority of wives are not okay with their man watching explicit content and pleasuring themselves to that explicit content. They're not okay with it. So either way you slice it, in my opinion, yeah, it's adultery. But let's just continue to see what else he has to say.
That is my unpredictable answer.
Well, there is a clinical rule of thumb that's akin to that, I would say. If you're trying to decide clinically whether someone's partaking in a habit, say use of alcohol, has reached the threshold of clinical significance, one of the things you do is ask the person you're assessing, is it interfering with your employment? Has it got you in trouble with the law? Is your family complaining? Does it stop you from doing other things that you should be doing? And so the judgment isn't the use of the forbidden substance itself. It is in some sense consequentialist. And I'm not saying that that's an absolute, but it is a hallmark.
But he's trying to say, like, okay, well, if it's not interfering with your family life, with your job, with your career, if everyone's happy, then you can continue to do it. It's not an issue. And I guess that's a very worldly take on this situation, because really you should be asking the question of, is it interfering with your relationship with God? Because most people who, watch this type of content and pleasure themselves to this type of content, they don't feel good afterward. They don't feel like, oh, I accomplished a lot today. I got all my checklists off my to-do list. No, they feel like, I need to repent. There's some shame going on. I shouldn't have done that. I need to ask for forgiveness. I need to get right with God. I need to, it's not, so it doesn't even matter if, even let's just say, for example, even if your wife doesn't care about it, even if your wife is okay with you doing it, that doesn't mean God's okay with it. And look, Dennis Prager, he said something at the beginning of the video. He said, men want variety. And he's not lying. Men want variety. And a lot of y'all gonna get upset with me for saying that, but let's just keep it real. It's been like that for thousands of generations. You can even look at the Bible. Look at the Bible. David, a man after God's own heart, David wanted variety. David wanted variety. He had wives. He had concubines. He still wanted Bathsheba. Even today, you look at men today. Most men today would say, yes, I want variety. That's what most men would say, especially with all this hookup culture and all this stuff going on. That's just a fact. But here's the thing. If we are men of God, we have to understand, like, hey, we have to have self-control. We have to have self-control. we can't just act on any impulse and any desire that we have just because we want to, just because it's there. We have to have self-control. So, going back to this conversation, I mean, it doesn't surprise me because most people within the world who are not Christian, who don't have a relationship with Jesus, they would probably have this same type of, idea. They wouldn't think there's anything wrong. But let's just continue because I want to see where else they go with this.
Of clinical judgment.
But Dennis, you're making, I think, too big a gap between, behavior and where it comes from. And surely the 10th commandment is exactly that. You could expound everything Jesus said from thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, or another woman you're not whatever.
Well,
in other words, the whole point
okay.
of coveting, it begins in the heart. And I understand your Hebrew word for covet is a desire that doesn't stop halfway.
Right, to take.
It takes action.
It's to take.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no ban in the 613 laws of the Torah on lusting. I don't even know there's a ta'ava is the closest you could get to lust in Hebrew, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you about that.
The covet is critical. I can be attracted to my neighbor's wife. I can't want her. There's a difference because but what about a single woman? I asked one of the great Protestant thinkers of our generation in a public debate in Phoenix. I asked them, so can a single Christian male look upon a single woman with lust? He can't be committing adultery. He's not married and she's not married. So is the real ban lust or is the ban on adultery?
Yeah. I mean, at least for me, when I hear all of this from my own Orthodox perspective, it's bewildering because at least from the tradition in which I am, it's not a morality question. Even the word morality, it bothers me. At least in the Christian tradition that I participate in, the call is to be transformed. The call is to be free. That's the call. Christ is calling us to be free. And so the idea of like, can you lust or can't you lust or can you do this or not this? The answer is we have desires in us, and these desires tend to enslave us. They tend to pull us into themselves. And these laws are exterior ways for you to understand how it is that you can now be free from these desires. None of the desires are wrong. Like sexual desire isn't wrong, desire to eat isn't wrong, none of these things are wrong. The problem is when they capture you.
The subordination.
Right, and so it's not about like trying to figure out if I'm sinning or not sinning. Like if I go to confession, I ask forgiveness for all the sins I've done, voluntary and involuntary. It's like I'm sinning all the time. If you want to know, like every all day long I'm sinning. But
that's why you're so much fun.
That's right. That's why I'm so much fun. But the idea is rather that to attend to my desires in the sense so that I'm not captured by them, so that I don't become obsessed, so that I don't fall into that. So to me, like the question of like legally trying to figure out like where I'm sinning or where I'm not, it's just like it pulls me into a world
So if a man has, and I know this case, I know a man who was saintly in taking care of his Alzheimer's wife, who got Alzheimer's at the young age of 50, and watched over her and bathed her for a decade. And then, so I would just ask, you asked me about pornography. So this man was faithful to a wife with whom he could not have relations, obviously, for a decade or more. I think it went to 15 years. Would he have been wrong in relieving his sexual tension with a photograph?
See,
I would say yes. I think it goes back to the self-control thing that we're talking about. And here's the thing. You're either going to be a slave to one of two things on this earth. You're either going to be a slave to your sin or you're going to be a slave to Jesus Christ. I don't think there's no in between. You're either going to be a slave to your sin or you're going to be a slave to Jesus Christ. And that is very clear in the way that we act, in the fruit that is produced in our lives. Galatians 5 verse 22, or actually, let me back up. Galatians 5 verse 19. When you follow the desires of your sinful nature, The results are very clear. Sexual immorality, impurity, lustful pleasures. When you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear. Sexual immorality, impurity, lustful pleasures. You're a slave to one of these two things, right? You're a slave to one of these two things. You're a slave to Jesus Christ, or you're a slave to your sinful nature. Which one do you want to be a slave to? So when we talk about this analogy that he was talking about, or not this analogy, this real life story that he was talking about where, hey, the wife got dementia at a very early age, the age of 50, but the husband had been faithful for 10 years. But now, look, they can't have a sexual relationship anymore because it's just not possible. So would he be wrong? Would the husband in that situation be wrong for wanting to, relieve himself by watching, explicit content on the internet? I would say, yeah, he would be wrong. He would be wrong. And I would say, because you have to understand that God calls us to have self-control. Verse 22 said the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our life: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Love. You got to love your wife regardless of what's going on. You entered into a covenant between you and your wife in the presence of God. And Jesus commands us to love our wife as he loves the church. Regardless of what situation is happening, health situation, financial situation, any situation. Joy, peace, patience. Patience. This life is very short. This life is very short. In that situation where he was talking about the wife having dementia, you got to understand this life is so short. And God is looking at how we are acting and how we are responding in certain situations. So it might be a worldly response to say, you know what? My wife, she's sick. Like we can't get it on anymore. What do you want me to do? Just sit here with my hands in my pocket? Like, what do you want me to do? Like, you got to understand this life is short. It's not going to be like that forever. It's not all about the temporary pleasures of this earth, but it's about striving to be in a closer and closer relationship with God. It's about striving to be holy as God is holy. That's what it's about. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It's not easy. Like, obviously, it's not easy, right? None of this stuff is easy. It would be a lot easier for most people to keep being controlled and remain a sin to their sin, remain a slave to their sinful nature. It would be a lot easier for most people just to do that. But some of us want more. Some of us want what only Jesus has to offer. And when you're walking out that life, you're called to live at a higher standard. So, it's interesting to see, the viewpoint of Dennis Prager. It's very interesting to see how he thinks. And obviously, look, he's Jewish, he's not Christian. And as he said himself, there's differences among those religions, right? Big differences. But this is a very worldly response and take on this, in my opinion. But what do y'all think? Let me know. Get in my comments. Do y'all agree with Dennis Prager? Do you agree with, my stance on this? I would love to know what you think. Get in my comments. I'm still trying to figure out this camera. So if I'm going in and out of focus, then, forgive me. And I'm testing a new format. So if you like it, let me know in the comments. If you hate it, let me know in the comments. All right. That's it, y'all. I'm out.